Jane Wright-Mitchell. I'm Chief Legal Officer at Steep Hill. I think there's a lot of similarities, a lot of tangents that sort of spread out. I think the first one is really they're both regulated industries. The pharmaceutical industry is more developed and complex regulations, but cannabis is definitely developing that way. I think with the medical use of cannabis, you're going to see more bleed over into the pharmaceutical regulations, but I also think you're going to see pharmaceutical regulations influencing cannabis as well, not just the vice versa. So there's a lot of similarities, and I think the cannabis industry will be developing nicely with the pharmaceutical industry. Well, since you don't have a recognized legal cannabis market federally, you have to rely on the state regulatory structures. So each state, anytime you don't have federal oversight, you're going to have a patchwork of state regulations, statutes. So how is that going to diverge into a federal regulation? I think the federal government will most likely look at best practices from the various states and probably draw on those best practices and then meld itself into a federal regulation. The states, therefore, are going to have to prepare for the regulations they're operating under today may not be the regulations you're operating under a federal government because of federal preemption and those types of things. But I don't think the federal government's going to completely scrap the state regulations. I think they're going to build on it. I think what you're getting to is what we call preemption. Will there be federal preemption? And the answer is legally, yes, there will be federal preemption. Anytime you have a federal statute, it's going to preempt state law. However, that doesn't mean that states can't take additional steps. So, for example, you've got the federal speed limit on federal highways, but states can determine that they want to go to a lower speed limit because of safety concerns. And I think we're going to see that in cannabis, where you're going to have a federal statute or federal regulation, and then states will take their own individual concerns and heighten regulations around those. So your answer to your question is yes, there will be some federal preemption over states, but states will be able to sort of pepper their own specific issues that they want to address with heightened regulation and statute. So I think that's core to Steep Hill's business. We are critically focused on safe patient supply, safe adult use supply of cannabis in the market. So a number of the things that we're doing with testing of pesticides, contaminants, heavy metals, anything that's not supposed to be in the cannabis, we are key on educating not only consumers, but the state, federal government, key players. And so I think going hand in hand with testing, we have to do the education on why that's important. Traditional pharma is already circling around the cannabis industry. I mean, you see some, I won't say traditional pharma companies already in it, but you do see R&D that's going on right now. There's not really any commercialization, but they're definitely waiting for the federal government to act before you'll see large scale movement of traditional pharma into the cannabis space. I think some people will say that's because pharma's nervous about cannabis, but I will venture that it's because of a reimbursement issue. Pharmaceuticals are traditionally reimbursed through the Centers of Medicare and Medicare CMS system, and if it's not federally legal, the federal government will not reimburse for those pharmaceuticals, so anybody who has a drug prescription benefit will not be able to take advantage of it. So I think as the federal government is recognizing cannabis as a legal commodity, you will see traditional pharma coming in.